Hi, my name is Sienna Graves, and I didn't walk out with a slam. I walked out so quietly, no one even noticed. Not until it was too late. It happened on a Saturday. The kind of spring day that's too beautiful for what it ended up carrying. Warm sun, fresh cut grass, pink frosting on white sheet cake. Mom insisted on hosting my birthday family style at her place, which meant Bree picked the guest list, Mom picked the food, and I picked up the tab. You know how people say you'll never forget the moment your heart breaks? I always thought that was about love, but heartbreak can come from the people who gave you life too. And this one? It didn't scream, it whispered. We were all gathered in the backyard. Mom's patio was decked out with those fake farmhouse signs. Live, laugh, love, staring at me like a joke. Bree, my older sister, stood in the center of the crowd retelling one of her stories. Loudly. She was always the center, and I learned a long time ago not to compete for attention. But she dragged me in anyway. You know what's wild? She said, laughing, glass of wine in hand. We used to think Sienna was the smart one. All those scholarships, all that potential. Now she's, what do you do again? Oh, right, charting blood pressure in a clinic and living alone with cats. Laughter rippled through the patio like smoke. I waited for someone, anyone, to say, that's enough. Instead, Mom looked at her drink, then up at me. She gave me that tired smile she always used when I was younger, the one that meant, don't start. Then she said it. Don't be so sensitive, Sienna. And just like that, something in me collapsed. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was the quiet kind of break, the kind that makes you stand up, pick up your purse, and leave the cake behind like it never mattered. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't even look back. It had been building for years, the offhand comments, the rewrites of family stories that always made me the extra, the complication, the moody one. I used to think it was just in my head, that I was reading too much into things. But birthdays have a way of cutting through the noise. They show you who's celebrating you and who's just showing up for the wine. I drove 2 hours that night. No music, just the sound of tires on highway and my breath catching between my ribs. I ended up at a small lakeside inn I'd once passed during a weekend clinic rotation. No plans, no overnight bag, just a credit card and the unbearable ache of realizing that no one in that house had ever seen me. When the receptionist asked if I was in town for an event, I almost laughed. No, I said. I think I'm in town for peace. She nodded, didn't press. Maybe she'd seen my kind before. Women who smile too often, stay too long, and leave too late. The next morning, I sat by the lake with my coffee, wrapped in a throw blanket the innkeeper had left outside the door. Ducks glided across the still water. I'd never known quiet like that. And I thought, if I don't go back, what would really change? The answer was brutal. Probably nothing. Mom would call Bree and complain. Bree would mock me in a group chat. Maybe they'd forget to invite me to something else. Maybe not. But me, I would change. Because the moment you realize you're not wanted, but you're still needed, that's when power shifts. When I got home 3 days later, I boxed up the framed pictures of family vacations. I deleted the group chat, and I blocked Bree. I wrote a letter to my mother that I never sent. It ended with this: You raised me to be strong, but only when it was convenient for you. I've decided to be strong even when it's not. And still, I didn't think it would matter until the mail came. A week after the birthday, a thick envelope arrived. Return address from a financing company I'd never heard of. The letter inside made my chest go tight. A final notice on a joint loan I had no knowledge of. Co-signed by someone with my social security number. The borrower? Bree. I stared at the page. She hadn't just humiliated me in front of the family. She'd stolen my name, my credit. And now, I realized, she and Mom had been doing more than laughing at me. They'd been using me. I didn't rage. I didn't call. I didn't even scream into a pillow. I opened my laptop, Googled a lawyer. Then I made tea, sat by the window, and wrote the first line of a new journal. This time, I will not ask for permission to protect myself. Ever noticed how silence can be louder than shouting? The envelope wouldn't stop staring at me from the kitchen counter. It sat there for 2 days. I moved it once, from left to right, as if that would change the content. I knew the name on the return address wasn't familiar, Delaney Financial, but the weight of the envelope told me whatever it held wasn't promotional mail. I finally opened it on a Thursday morning, just after a rainstorm. There's something about gray light through wet windows that makes the world feel more honest. The words on the letter pulled the breath straight from my lungs. Final notice, outstanding balance, $18,346.70. The loan account was in both our names. Bree's signature was messy and slanted. Mine was too, except I never wrote it. My heart didn't race. It thudded, methodical, loud, and low, like a distant drum I couldn't shut out. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the silence hum around me. Then, I reached for my phone and called the number at the top of the letter. Delaney Financial, this is Autumn speaking. Hi, I think I just received a loan notice in error. I never opened an account with you, but it has my name and social security number attached. The line went quiet for a beat. Then, can I confirm your full name and the last 4 digits of your SSN? I did. I see the account, she said after a few clicks. It was opened 4 years ago. Joint application, property improvement loan, dispersed to a business account under a B. Graves. That would be the co-applicant. My sister, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. I'm sorry? Nothing, I muttered. Just, never mind. 4 years ago. That would have been right after Bree had her accidental water damage situation, mold in the basement of the house she temporarily inherited from our cousin during their move overseas. She told the family she fixed it all herself, took pride in learning how to manage money like a grown-up. I didn't know she'd learned with my name. I drove to a legal aid clinic that same afternoon. It wasn't much. A modest brick building next to a faded laundromat, with a cracked parking lot and dying marigolds in a planter by the door. But the moment I walked in, I felt grounded. The intake lawyer, a woman named Jaya, listened without interruption. She didn't frown, she didn't sigh. She just nodded and took notes. You're not the first sibling I've seen sitting across from me like this, she said softly. You won't be the last. That's not comforting, I muttered. It's not meant to be. It's meant to tell you you're not crazy. Identity theft within families is more common than people think, especially when the target is quiet, dependable, and guilt-trained. Guilt-trained? I echoed. You were taught to love without boundaries. That's a liability. Her words sliced through me, not cruelly, but with precision. We filed a fraud claim. I started building a paper trail. And as I flipped through old boxes at home, searching for anything Bree might have stolen, a utility bill, an old signature form, I found a folder I didn't remember packing. Inside were copies of my grandfather's medical files, handwritten notes, medication logs, my notes. I'd forgotten I even kept them. For 2 years, I'd cared for him while Mom and Bree managed logistics. That was their excuse to stay uninvolved. While I cleaned wounds, made sure prescriptions were refilled, drove him to chemo, while I watched him fade, quietly, alone. In that folder, tucked behind a worn index card, was a photocopy of a will. It wasn't the final version, I knew that. But it was a draft. My name was on it. Grandpa had intended to leave me partial ownership of the house we all grew up in. But I'd never seen that name in the final documents. At his funeral, I wasn't even listed as a beneficiary. That night, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, sharp and efficient. Sienna, you okay? Did you know Bree used my name to open a loan? Pause. Oh, honey, I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. There isn't. I filed a fraud claim. It's real. I have copies. Another pause. Longer. Sienna, why are you trying to tear the family apart again? There it was. The classic pivot. "I'm not tearing anything," I said, voice cold now. "I'm just done pretending I owe loyalty to people who don't offer basic respect in return." She sighed. "This isn't like you. You've always been the peacemaker." "No," I corrected. "I've always been the sacrifice." I ended the call before she could weaponize guilt again. The next day, Bree emailed me. A subject line in all caps. "Can we talk?" Her message wasn't an apology. It was a defense. "You know how hard it was for me back then. I didn't think you'd notice. You weren't even using your credit for anything serious." She'd stolen from me and framed it as a favor. I didn't reply. I printed the email, added it to the folder, and made a quiet decision. This wouldn't end in a dramatic confrontation. It would end in precision, in proof, in court, if necessary. Later that week, I met Jaya again. "There's something else," I told her. "I found an early draft of a will. It shows I was supposed to get partial ownership of the family home, but I never did." Her eyebrows rose. "Do you have reason to believe the final will was altered?" "I have reason to believe it was buried." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in the car afterward, parked by the lake where I'd escaped after the birthday. And I breathed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I was gathering. Ever looked at a signature and realized it wasn't just ink, but betrayal? The smell of old paper has a weight to it. Musty, acidic, almost sour. It filled my apartment the night I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by boxes I hadn't opened since the funeral. I hadn't planned to go digging again, but something Jaya said during our last meeting kept echoing in my head. If they lied about the money, they likely lied about the paperwork. The photocopy I found last week was only a draft. I needed more, something signed, dated, witnessed, something that couldn't be brushed off as a mistake or a misunderstanding. Because I knew how this would play out if I didn't come armed. Mom would clutch her pearls and say I was confused. Bree would accuse me of twisting things, and somehow, again, I'd be made to feel like I was the one tearing the family apart. After 2 hours, fingers smudged with dust and old ink, I found it. A thin manila envelope labeled Estate Final in my grandfather's handwriting. Inside, 3 pages, notarized, stamped, signed. My name was there, clear, in black and white, 50% of the house he'd bought in 1981. There was no room for ambiguity. Yet when the estate was finalized, when the lawyers read the version Mom submitted, my name was nowhere. I remembered sitting silently at that reading, assuming I'd just been overlooked. I didn't ask. I didn't want to seem greedy. But greed, it seemed, had already been weaponized. Just not by me. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the sky change shades through the window. At 6 a.m., I emailed Jaya. The subject line was simple. I found it. She called within the hour. "Do you trust me?" she asked. "I think you're the first person I've trusted in a long time." "Good," she said, "because we're not just talking about a fraud case anymore. This is inheritance suppression, possibly criminal. It's time we raise the stakes." That week, I filed a formal inquiry with the county records office. I requested access to the probate documents filed after my grandfather's death. It took 3 days. When they emailed the scanned copies, my hands shook as I opened the files. The version Mom submitted was dated 1 week before my grandfather passed, but I knew his health in that final week. I'd fed him by hand. He couldn't hold a pen, much less sign and notarize 3 pages. She had forged it, not just erased me. Rewritten history. I met Jaya that Friday in a small private room behind the clinic. She brought a second lawyer with her, someone from a bigger firm who specialized in estate fraud. We laid everything out, side by side, real versus fake, truth versus control. "Do you want to press charges?" Jaya asked. I didn't answer right away. I thought about that backyard birthday, about Mom's eyes sliding away, about Bree's laugh echoing as she tossed my life around like a punchline. I thought about every time I was told, "Don't make this a thing," when I tried to speak up. And I thought about every woman who'd been taught to make herself smaller to keep the peace. Yes, I said finally. I do. But before we moved forward, Jaya made a recommendation. You need to lock your name down, Sienna. Freeze your credit, seal access, and talk to someone who can help you protect what's yours going forward. That's how I ended up in the sterile office of a financial strategist named Kamira. She didn't offer tea. She offered solutions: asset shielding, identity restoration, estate counterfiling, trust building. She laid it out like armor. I usually work with high-profile clients, she said, typing rapidly. But women like you, I work with out of principle. I wasn't used to being taken seriously. It was disorienting, but it felt good. Then came the email, from Bree. The subject line was lowercase this time. Just talk to me. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Mom's not doing well. She's devastated. She says you're going to ruin everything Grandpa built. Please stop this. You're being cruel. I know you're angry, but family is family. She attached a photo of the house, our childhood porch, freshly painted. The caption read, "You really want to take this away from us?" The manipulation was so thick, I nearly gagged. No apology, no ownership, just another play for sympathy. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I forwarded the email to Jaya with one line. Add it to the file. On Sunday, I drove past the house. Not to stop, just to see. The porch swing was gone. The shutters were new. Bree's car was parked in the driveway. The lawn was too perfect, the house too calm, like it had been scrubbed clean of memory. But the past can't be painted over, and I wasn't interested in reclaiming nostalgia. I wanted what was mine. Ever felt like your name was stolen from a page, and the story rewritten without you? There's a particular quiet before someone knows they've been found out. It's not peace, it's pause. The kind where people instinctively hold their breath, waiting to see how far the consequences will reach. That was the silence I walked into when I showed up at the county clerk's office on a Tuesday morning, dressed in all black. Not for mourning, but for clarity. I wasn't there to grieve. I was there to reclaim. Inside my bag were 3 items. The original, notarized will listing me as heir. The falsified version my mother submitted to probate. A flash drive containing evidence of email exchanges, including Bree's attempts at guilt-tripping and circumstantial financial motives. Jaya had prepped me well. You're not just showing the truth, she'd said. You're showing a pattern. They didn't just erase your name. They turned you into a utility. She was right. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource, a ghost with a signature. The filing went quickly, too quickly. When the clerk scanned the documents, she frowned, glanced at me, then at the timestamp on the forged will. Is the signer deceased? Yes. Passed 3 days before this was allegedly signed. Her lips pressed together. She didn't say anything else, just stamped it and sent it up the chain. But I could tell, this wasn't the first time she'd seen someone erased on paper. The next week moved like molasses. Every hour stretched. Every notification made my heart spike. I wasn't afraid of retaliation. Bree didn't have the guts for real confrontation. But I knew my mother. She would call. She would cry. She would twist herself into the victim before I could even finish a sentence. And she did. Sienna, she said one evening, voice trembling, just enough to sound rehearsed. I heard what you did. You really filed something against your own family? I didn't answer right away. Let her fill the silence. I don't understand why you're dragging this into the courts. We're supposed to be blood. I was supposed to be a daughter, I said. But apparently, that role came with footnotes. Oh, don't start, she snapped, the performance faltering. You've always been dramatic. You think you're owed everything just because you took care of him. That's what families do. We help each other. I felt something shift in my spine. Not anger, not sadness, precision. No, I said softly. You help yourselves. You call it family, but it's really a feeding ground. And I was just the cleanup crew. You're being cruel, she hissed. This will destroy us. You destroyed us the day you rewrote Grandpa's will. She hung up. 3 days later, Bree posted a photo of the house with the caption, "Sometimes people forget what loyalty looks like." The comments poured in. Friends, distant cousins, mutuals we hadn't spoken to in years. Some passive-aggressive, some veiled in concern. But I didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. Instead, I spoke where it mattered. In a room with Jaya, Kamira, and an estate lawyer named Harris, who specialized in suppressed inheritance claims. We met in a neutral office space. Glass walls, sleek wooden table, no clutter. The kind of environment that reminded people power didn't always have to be loud. "We're ready to move forward," Harris said. "They'll be notified within 5 business days. They'll either settle or we'll proceed with full civil litigation." Kamira leaned in, folding her hands. "If they push back, we bring in the forensic handwriting expert. Their house of cards falls." I nodded. "Let them try." That weekend, something unexpected happened. I got a call from an old neighbor, Mrs. Carson. She used to live 2 doors down from us when we were growing up. She hadn't called me in years. "I heard you're going through something with the family," she said gently. "I just thought, maybe there's something you should know." Her voice trembled as she told me about a visit my mother had made to her house 3 years ago. She'd been looking for witnesses for a legal document, said it was just a health directive for Dad. She asked me to sign, but I refused. Something felt off. The timing, the language. She left angry. Did she find someone else? I don't know. But Sienna, be careful. They've done things you don't even know about. That same night, I got an email from the court. A copy of the acknowledgement letter had been sent to Janice Graves and Bree Graves, notifying them that a legal review of the estate was officially underway. Within 24 hours, Bree texted me, "You think this makes you powerful? You'll regret this. You'll end up alone." I stared at the message. Then I blocked the number. I spent the next few days finalizing my protection. Kamira helped me establish a personal trust. Jaya filed a cease and desist to stop Bree from attempting to use my name or credit again. My identity, for the first time in years, was mine alone. Then I did something small, but symbolic. I changed the lock screen on my phone to a photo of the lakeside sunrise I'd taken after my birthday disaster. A reminder, peace wasn't something they could destroy, because they never built it to begin with. It started as therapy, or maybe confession. I wrote it without the intention of sending it, just trying to drag the truth out of me and place it somewhere safe. A letter, addressed to my mother, typed, single-spaced, no flourishes. I didn't know then that it would end up on a lawyer's desk. "Mom, I know you've spent your life convinced you were holding our family together, but all you did was hold the narrative. You made sure Bree always had the spotlight, always had a defense, always had a second chance. I didn't want a spotlight, I wanted fairness. But when I asked for it, you called it drama. When I asked for space, you called it selfish. And when I finally left, you acted like I abandoned you. But let's be honest, you never really showed up for me to begin with." I printed the letter and folded it into a drawer. That should have been the end of it. But Jaya called 2 days later. "Are you sure you want to keep this off the record?" she asked. "It's personal." "I think it's necessary." She paused. "They're requesting mediation." "Mediation?" I repeated, nearly laughing. "After all this, they want a table and a coffee break?" "They think you're bluffing. Mediation is their play to keep this out of the courts. But it could work in our favor. If they lie under pressure, we document it." My pulse slowed. Not from fear, but from calculation. "Then I want them in the room. Both of them." The mediation room wasn't a courtroom, but it felt like one. Neutral decor, generic artwork, a faint scent of stale coffee, and tension so thick I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Bree walked in first. Hair curled tight, lips pressed into a performance-ready line. She wore a beige blazer like armor. Her phone barely left her hand. Mom followed. Slower. Her face was more weathered than I remembered, but not softer. They didn't greet me. Good. The mediator, a calm, bespectacled man named Alan, began by outlining the purpose: restoration if possible, accountability if necessary. I wanted the second one. I'm not here to play out family feuds, I said early. I'm here because I was defrauded, and because my name was stripped from my grandfather's legacy. On paper, on purpose. You're being dramatic again, Bree said instantly, scoffing. There was no fraud. You just misunderstood the paperwork. Jaya slid the original will across the table. Alan picked it up, scanned the signature, then the timestamp. Notarized a week before Mr. Graves passed, he murmured, which directly contradicts the version submitted to probate. Mom flinched. Bree kept her eyes on her phone. Alan continued. And you're asserting this version, he tapped the falsified copy, was the one filed by mistake? That was the only one we had, Mom said, eyes darting. Maybe there was a mix-up. We were grieving. No, I said quietly. You were rewriting. They didn't expect the next part. Jaya pulled out a small speaker. Hit play. It was a recorded voicemail. Bree's voice, sharp, agitated. You think this makes you powerful? You'll regret this. You'll end up alone. Alan paused the recording. Ms. Graves, did you leave this message? Bree hesitated. I was upset. That's not an answer, he said calmly. Was it you? She nodded. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like panic in her eyes. Because this wasn't family now. This was legal, documented, real. They tried to pivot. Mom reached across the table, voice trembling. We just didn't want to lose the house, Sienna. Bree had already moved in. She was the one who needed stability. And I didn't? My voice was steady, cold. I was working night shifts, sending you money for repairs, while you erased my name from the deed. That wasn't intentional. You used a false will. I didn't know it was false. Jaya leaned forward. Then why did you ask your neighbor to witness a health directive the week your father couldn't even hold a pen? The silence that followed was so thick, it rang. By the end of the mediation, Alan closed the folder with a sigh. I'll be recommending full litigation proceed, he said. This has moved well beyond miscommunication. I stood. Bree looked away. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Don't, I said. Not unless it starts with the truth. That night, I went home and pulled the letter from the drawer. I reread it once. Then I added one line to the end. This isn't vengeance, it's correction. And for the first time in a long time, I slept without waking in the middle of the night. What would you say if the truth finally sat across from you and couldn't look you in the eye? There's a moment, right before the world hears your truth, where everything goes still. Like the air around you knows something irreversible is about to happen. That was the moment I stood backstage, gripping a folded page in my hand, waiting to speak. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't revenge. It was a financial empowerment forum for women. And I wasn't scheduled to speak, but Kamira had pulled strings. You need to be seen, not just heard, she told me. Not for them, for you. The moderator called my name. I stepped forward. No spotlight, just clear, steady light across the stage. A mic in one hand, my words in the other. I'm not here to share a sob story, I began. I'm here to explain how a family can smile in your face while quietly gutting your life behind your back, and how you take that life back. No one moved, not even the photographers. I told them about the birthday party where I was called the disappointment, about the letter in the mail I didn't expect, about discovering my own name attached to a debt I never created. But I didn't give names. I didn't need to. What I did give was proof. Screenshots of loan documents, redacted legal filings, voice recordings that had been authenticated and timestamped. Not for sympathy, for structure. My identity was treated like a shared resource, I said, voice clear. My existence was edited out of a will because I was quiet, dependable, and inconvenient. And then, without flourish, I said what I never thought I'd say out loud. My mother forged my grandfather's will. My sister used my name to take a loan, and they nearly got away with it. A collective breath left the room. But I stopped them, and if you've ever felt like your silence is your only defense, know this: silence protects abusers more than it ever protects you. The applause wasn't loud. It was slow, rising, and it didn't stop. That night, my inbox exploded, not just from strangers thanking me, but from local reporters who'd attended the forum. They wanted the full story. Kamira cautioned me. Are you ready to go on record? I already am. We sent over verified legal documents and stripped identifiers where necessary. Within 48 hours, a local digital paper ran the headline: Daughter erased from inheritance fights back and wins. It wasn't tabloid style. It was sharp, clean, and it told the truth. Bree and Mom weren't named, but the timeline made it impossible not to guess. The fallout came fast. A former colleague of Bree's shared the article on LinkedIn. Her name started disappearing from things: press mentions, invites. Her spa, launched with misused funds, quietly shuttered a month later. The website went dark. Then a letter arrived from the county clerk. The forged will had been invalidated. My name was reinstated as co-beneficiary, but I didn't want the house anymore. Instead, I did something better. I donated my portion of the home's value, after appraisal, to establish a local grant program for women rebuilding after financial betrayal. We called it the Quiet Claim Fund. Kamira cried when she saw the check. You could have kept it all, she said. I did, I said simply. Weeks later, Bree called from a different number. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. I hope it was worth it, she said. You blew up the family. I listened to the message once. Then I deleted it. That weekend, I returned to the Lakeside Inn. Same room, same view. Only this time, I wasn't running. I was resting. I stood by the dock and whispered to no one. You called me the disappointment, but I was the storm. And storms don't ask for permission. It had been 3 months since the article ran. Long enough for the noise to settle, for people to find something else to talk about. Long enough for the people who wronged me to start hoping I'd vanish again. But I didn't. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. Not in the way they had counted on. That morning, I stood in front of a small group of women at the first grant orientation meeting for the Quiet Claim Fund. The room wasn't big, maybe 20 folding chairs and a coffee station in the back, but it felt full of something real. Survivors. Strivers. Women whose names had been signed without their permission, or who'd been asked to sacrifice too much for the sake of family. I wasn't there to give a speech, just to welcome them. One woman approached me afterward, probably in her 50s, soft eyes, nervous hands. Your story felt like you were narrating my diary, she said. I thought I was the only one who'd been financially erased. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of recognition. You're not, I said, and you're not invisible anymore. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address, but I recognized the slant of the S. Bree. I stared at it for a long time. I almost threw it away, but something about the weight of the envelope made me pause. Inside were 3 things. A note. I guess we were more alike than I wanted to admit. A check, made out to the Quiet Claim Fund. Small but signed. A photo. Us as kids, sitting on the porch swing. I was holding a popsicle. Bree was looking at me, mid-laugh. No tension, no power games. Just 2 girls who hadn't yet learned what roles they were expected to play. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumph either. Just something heavier than forgiveness, but lighter than rage. A kind of exhale. I didn't reach out, but I didn't rip it up either. Mom never sent a letter, never called again. I heard through a distant cousin that she'd moved in with her sister. The house, the one that started this storm, was now rented out to strangers. Some endings don't require confrontation. They just require distance. On the 1-year anniversary of that birthday, The one I walked away from, I did something different. I invited a few friends over, people who showed up without entitlement, who saw me without performance. We had wine and music, nothing extravagant, just warmth, the kind that doesn't come with conditions. One friend, Layla, toasted, "To women who stopped waiting to be included." We clinked glasses. I looked around and realized something I hadn't before. They weren't just friends, they were my new family, chosen, solid, earned. Later that night, I stepped outside, barefoot on the grass, cool air curling around my shoulders. I looked up at the stars, then whispered the final line of the letter I'd never sent. "You called me the disappointment, but I've built a life no one can erase, and I no longer need your permission to belong." And in that moment, I knew. I had become the version of me they never imagined. Because they never imagined I'd stop trying to prove I deserved a seat and start building my own table. Looking back, I used to think walking away meant failure. But sometimes, leaving isn't giving up. It's finally choosing yourself. I stopped asking for a seat at their table and built my own. And in doing so, I found peace, purpose, and people who saw me clearly. Maybe you've been there too. Quietly erased, underestimated, told you were too sensitive. Maybe you're still carrying a version of silence that doesn't belong to you. If you've ever felt that way, what would reclaiming your space look like? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from or how this story resonates with your journey. And if it didn't connect with you, tell me why. I want to hear from you either way. If this story touched something in you, don't forget to subscribe for more. You never know which story might be the one that reminds you. You were never the problem.